Okay, hello everybody, this is Mike from ViewPlus. We're going to go ahead and get started now with our webinar on setting paper sizes and creating Avery labels. If you have any questions, feel free to keep those in your head, and I'm going to go through and answer everything I can at the end of the webinar. But we are going to be recording this, and the recordings will be available through ViewPlus. You'll get a link in your email telling you how to obtain the recording. So first I'm going to go through and show you guys how to set your paper size in the printer driver. And so that is pretty easy. The first thing you need to do is get to your list of printers. And I'm using Windows 7, so if you're using an older version of Windows, some of these commands might be a little bit different. So for Windows 7, you pull up the Start menu, and you can type printers into the search box. And then you select printers and devices. All right. And then I'm going to move down to my ViewPlus printer. And I have ViewPlus Max here. So the way that you get to the printer driver to change the settings is to go up to the menu, and then you arrow down and you have to select Printer Properties. There's a few other ones that are similar, and you want to be sure to select Printer Properties and not Printer Preferences. Okay, and we start out on a General tab here, and we need to change the paper size, which is actually located in here a little bit farther. So the first thing I do is I go down to the button that says Printer Preferences. Well, it says it's Preferences. And then I choose the Advanced button. And there's a paper size selector here. If you use a screen reader, you have to use the right arrow to get to it. You can't tab there. Whereas if you're sighted, you can just click on it, and then you can select your paper size here. I'm going to change it to 11.5 by 11, so that's the wide size of Braille paper. And then you just hit OK. And then you hit OK on the general screen to close that. And another thing, when you have this Properties window open, all of the other settings for the actual hardware of the printer are located in the Tiger tab. So I'm just going to activate that tab and then explain it a little bit. Okay. So you can choose whether or not to have your printer do interpoint if it is one of our models that can here in the first box. You can choose whether you want magnification, which is good for graphics sometimes. There are also options dealing with printing graphics for inverting colors, and you really don't need to worry about that unless you're a blind user who can't adjust those things in graphics editing software. But for transcribers or people who can edit graphics, it's better to do it in the software rather than here in the driver. But here you can also change your type of paper and your Braille dot height, which is something that a lot of users do. So here in the Braille dot height, you have high, normal, and low as your options, and you just can use the arrows to change those. We support any thicknesses of paper, which you can select here in the media type box. We go all the way from plastic sheet down to as thin as copy paper. I'm going to set this on Braille paper just to be sure. If you have something that's heavier, or you just want to make your dot height even higher than you would get with plastic sheet, with the plastic sheet setting, which is a really, really hard punch force, you can add a media type and actually adjust the punch forces here in the media type dialog box. But I'm not going to worry about that because I'm just going to set Braille paper. So So I've got it on Braille paper now. And that's pretty much it for the driver. So I'm going to hit OK to close this. And one of the reasons that you need to set that in the driver when you first get your embosser set up is to tell the other software that you're using that it's using that type of paper so that they match. Otherwise you may get errors from Microsoft Word or from whatever program you're using that margins are not set in the printable area. And this is the way to avoid getting that error. So, okay, I'm going to go ahead and close the control panel, and then I'm going to start Microsoft Word. And I'm going to explain the difference between, there's two different places in Microsoft Word that you can change paper sizes and margins, so it's a little bit confusing, and I just want to clear that up for our users here. So we start Microsoft Word in our print document, so I'm just going to type some in. I typed in, this is a test, and in Microsoft Word you can change the paper size and the margins and everything for this print document, but with Tiger Software Suite, which is our Braille translator, it runs in Microsoft Word under a menu called Tiger, and in Windows 7 or Office 2007, it's actually under another menu called Addins. So I'm just going to go to Addins. And with a screen reader, to get to Addins, you hit Alt, and then let it go, and then hit X, and it will put you in the Addins list. And then you can arrow down to Tiger. And you see here are all of our options for the Braille translator. And we're going to arrow down to Formatter Settings because that's where we actually set up the settings that will apply to our Braille document when it's translated. Okay, so on the Formatter Settings window, there's several buttons. One button brings up the Language Settings dialog, one brings up the Braille and Ink settings, one brings up the Document Settings, and then there are some for saving these settings in what we call a Tiger profile. So I'm just going to tab down and read the settings and make sure that I've got it set to what I want. Okay, my language is set right. And I've got Interline turned on, so the sighted users will be able to see the original text there, and that's what I want. So. Okay, my paper size is set right, but I'm going to go ahead and click on the Document Settings button to show you all where to change the paper size. Okay, so the Document Settings window here has a printer selector, so you make sure that your ViewPlus printer is set on the right machine, and then you go down to the paper size combo box, and you can just either use the pull down arrow or you can just hit down arrow in order to select the right paper size. Okay, and I just make sure that mine's set to Tiger 11.5 by 11 for the wide paper. And then down under that you have your margin settings. And so in Microsoft Word, when you start a print document, the margins are default at 1 inch. And 1 inch is a lot bigger than the margins that Braille usually uses. And we recommend for Braille that you use 0.5 or 1/2 inch all the way around. And in our document settings window here, we enter it in inches. If you're familiar with other Braille software, you might be thinking of it as measured in cells, but it's not that way in Tiger Software Suite. So I'm going to go ahead and type in 0.5 for all my margins. And if we had binding holes on the left side for binding, we would want to set it to 0.75 on the left to allow for that space. Otherwise, the Braille would get cut off by the binding holes. Okay, so I've got that, and I hit OK. And then I want to save these settings as a Tiger profile so that I don't have to change them every time I want to use this paper. So I'm going to click on Save as a Tiger Profile. And I'm going to enter a descriptive name here so that I remember what it is next time. I'm just going to call it Wide Length Braille Paper so that I remember that that's the change I made. Okay. And then I close the window, and when I translate my document, you'll see in the Braille document that shows up that the margins will match what we set in the document settings. So to translate, I'm going to Addins, and then Tiger, and translate document. Okay, and so it translated my Braille here, and it changed the margins to what was in my document settings. Okay. So that's the basics of setting up a Word document for Braille translation with proper page size and for margins. And so now I'm going to show you how to create a custom paper size just in case the size of paper that you want to use is not listed in your printer by default. So I'm going to close Microsoft Word, and I don't want to save my document, so I hit no. I need to go back to Printers and Devices. So I'm typing printers into my start menu and then hitting enter on devices. And then what you do is you select the printer first, and I want this for the Macs, and then you choose server properties on this printer's list window. And the way you get there if you're a blind user with speech is to hit Shift Tab. And there is a row of buttons. The first one is Add Device, and you hit the left or right arrows to get to Server Properties. Okay, and I found it, so I hit Enter. And it starts out in a list of all the forms that are available, which is actually the paper sizes for the machine that you selected. And I want to add a new one, so I'm going to tab down and check the Create New Form box. And I'm going to put in a form name, so I Shift Tab backwards to the form name, and I'm going to make, let's say, I want to print on maybe 3x5 cards, so I'm going to say small cards as the name. You can select whether you want the measurements English or metric. And then below that, you actually type in the size of the paper. So I'm going to have the width is the first one, so 5 inches. And the height I'm going to put as 3. There are some margins here that you need to ignore. And then you need to tab past the OK and Cancel buttons if you're a blind user and select Save Form. Okay. And then we can go ahead and hit OK, or close actually. Okay, and now when we go back to our driver, by going to File and choosing Printer Properties again, we go back to Printing Preferences, and back to Advanced again. And now in our paper size list, we will have the small cards that we just created. And that'll show up in Word or anywhere when you try to print. So now I'm just going to hit OK to close these things. And now we're going to talk about printing the Avery labels. Okay, so I'm just going to pull up a clean Word document here. Okay, so we want to print sticky labels in Braille, and we have forms that are included in Microsoft Word by default for doing this. So it makes it really easy to get the spacing and the placement of the text exactly right. So what you do first is you go up to Mailings, and for screen reader you can hit Alt and then M to get there. Okay, so I've got Mailings activated, and then I need to go down to Labels. So I hit down from Mailings. And the first section is Envelopes, and I want to arrow right over. Labels is the second one, so I'm going to hit Enter. Okay, and it brings up a dialog box with some options for me to set here. And the first thing that I need to do is hit the Options button. Okay, so I found the Options button, and I need to select the product number. And the product number for the Avery labels that we're going to be using, let's see, I need to find that here. Is 8662. Okay, so I got that. And then I'm going to hit the Details button because I need to make sure that the margins are going to match. Okay, so you'll need to actually take note, write down these margins because we need to apply them to the Word document after it's created. So actually, the only two margins that are important is the top and the vertical side margin. So it's 0.83 and 0.16. So I'm going to write those down, and then I'm going to hit OK. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. And now I go to the New Document button, and you should see the template for the blank labels here in the Word document. Okay, so it puts me in this template for writing out the Avery labels, which is actually 2 columns of labels, and it puts into the Word document a separator column in between, so there's actually 3 columns. So when you're entering the text for the labels, you need to skip over that middle column. And one thing that I want to mention here is that when you type in your labels, you want to first set your font to something that's going to be size 29, because when you translate to Braille, it's going to obviously be resized to something bigger, so you want to make sure that stuff's going to fit. So I'm going to go ahead and change my font size by going to my Home ribbon, and then tabbing over to the font size and change it to 29 and hit Enter. Now I'm going to go ahead and type in my labels. Label 1. I typed in label 1, and then I tab over the empty column, and then I type in label 2. And then I need to change my font before I start typing in the second label, actually. So actually, it's probably easier to type them all in first and then select all and change the font. So that's what I'm actually going to do. So I've got label 2, label 3, skip over the blank column again and type in label 4, label 5, and I'm just tabbing between the columns here. Okay, and now I'm going to select all. And then I'm going to go back up to the Home tab and set my font to 29. Okay, so that's how it's going to look when it comes out in Braille. So those margin settings for the paper that we wrote down for the Avery labels, we're going to have to enter in to our document settings so that they come out right on the Braille page. So I'm going to go back to Addins, Tiger, Formatter Settings, Document Settings, and then we have to change our page size to Tiger letter, actually, for these labels. So bear with me while I look for the Tiger letter size here. Okay, it's actually the first one, so you can just hold down your up arrow until you get there. Okay, and then I'm going to change our margins back to 0.63 and 16, or 0.83 actually for the top. Okay, and the side margin was 0.16. Okay, so the top is 0.83, the bottom was 0.83, and then for the two sides I have each at 0.16. And then I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. And I can save this profile if I want to print labels again, so I'm going to go ahead and choose Save as a Tiger profile, and I'm going to say Avery Labels. That way I won't have to load in those margins every time. I can just open my Tiger profile and I'll be okay. So I'm going to hit Close, and then I'm going to translate my document by going Addins. And then Tiger, and then Translate Document. Okay, so it translated my labels. It left the print in with the Braille. And if I want to print these, it's very simple. You can just go to the File menu and choose Print, just like from any other program. Or you can hit Control-P, which is what I'm doing. And then you select your printer name up here. Okay, it's set on my Macs, and I can just hit OK and it will print. But I'm not going to actually print right now, so I'm just going to close this. And that is everything that I wanted to show you in this webinar. So now I'm going to open it up for questions, and so I'm going to close my Word documents here. I have a question here from Tamara. She's asking if Addins is available for Office 2003. Actually, when you install Tiger Software Suite in 2003, you'll see the Tiger menu up along the menu bar with File, Edit, View, and everything else, and you won't have to worry about the Addins menu. But the templates for the Avery labels and everything will be there, and they'll be in a Labels and Mailings option in one of your menus. Okay, so if you have a question, it's probably easier if you type it into the question pane, then we can see it quicker. We have a question if this will work on the ViewPlus Pro Inc. And yes, it should. You can use the single sheet feeder with the Avery labels, and you shouldn't have a problem with that, but you do have to use the sheet feeder for the labels that I use today. They won't work unless you have one of our machines that will take single sheets. I have a question from Mary Hall that says, how do you open another Tiger document? But I'm not quite sure what you mean by that. After you translate your Braille in Microsoft Word, you can go to the File menu and choose Save, and it will save as a Word document with your translated Braille in it. If that doesn't answer your question, then if you can ask it in a different way, then maybe I can figure it out. Yeah, that sounds like the single sheet feeder for the Pro. So if you want to load cut sheet labels into the Pro with ink attachment, then you can load it in the front there. Hi. Actually, I have a question from Rice Halton about Interlined Inc lining up with Braille. Sometimes that happens with certain documents, so I would recommend contacting our support department. That way we can look at your issue and get it figured out. Yep, if you have an embosser with a single sheet feed, then you can go ahead and just put the stack in the imprint if that's the one you have, or if you use a desktop embosser, you'll put the sheet in one at a time and they'll work. And then Jennifer Moore asks if there are clear plastic Braille labels that can be printed. There's no reason why you can't do that. You just need to look up the product ID when you buy that from the store or whatever, or from the catalog, and then you can look down that list of product numbers that we saw in Microsoft Word when we selected details, and just make sure that it's there. But there's no reason the hardware won't print on it. I have a comment from Kristen Hannon that she's only ever used tractor-fed Braille paper with her machine. I'm not sure which model you have, but most of them support single sheet feeding, whether or not it's stack sheet feeding or a single sheet one at a time, which is probably what you've got, but I'm not sure what model you have. I have a question from John Steiner about whether or not this will work with Spot Dot, and yes, the Spot Dot would be the easiest one to do this with. If you have Avery labels, you can load a stack of them into the Spot Dot and it will work fine. I have a question from Pamela Oliver about the margins, and we recommend 0.5 inches for the margins for Braille documents, because that's actually the measurement of one Braille cell. So that's the standard for Braille documents. And for a binding margin on the left side of the page, if you have those holes, we recommend 0.75 inches. I have a question from Patrick Stoops about putting the paper in the machine face up or face down, and that depends on what machine you have. Can you let us know what machine you have? Then I'll answer that. I got that Patrick is using a Cub Junior, and so when you put the paper into that, you actually want to put it in, I believe it's face down when you use the single sheet feeding. I'm not 100% sure about that though, so you might just have to experiment. And then I have another question from Christian Hanlon about setting margins, and she's saying that she mostly uses Word to create tactile graphics. So it is acceptable to just print graphics from Microsoft Word and change the margins to 0.5 for your original Word document if you're not going to be running the Tiger Software Suite translator. I have a question from Marek about translating grade 1 or grade 2 Braille, and we've got some extra time here, so I'm going to go ahead and show you guys where the grade 1 and grade 2 setting is. It's actually in the language settings. So I'm going to start Microsoft Word up again. Okay, and so it's back in our formatter settings, so I'm going to go to Addins. Okay, Addins, and then Tiger, then Formatter Settings, and then this is actually in the language settings, which is the first option on our Formatter Settings. Uh-oh. Okay, so the language settings has a couple of combo boxes at the beginning that have the language and then the level of contracted Braille. And you just change it up here. It's labeled grade 1 uncontracted. And you can actually have a mix of grade 1 and grade 2 Braille in your document. And the way that you do that is you actually change this translatable font combo box. And you assign a font to which one you want to translate. So I have Agency FB, and that would be applied to things that you want in grade 1. You would put them in that font. And then you would select this checkbox for Translate Secondary Language. And then you'd get these options down here for your secondary font. And I'm just going to change that to English. And grade 2, and I'm going to change the font here to Times New Roman. Okay, so anything in Times New Roman will come out in grade 2, and anything in Agency FB will come out in grade 1. So I'm going to go ahead and hit OK here, and hit OK to go back to my Word document here, and then I'm going to type 2 sentences. The first one is going to say, this is going to be in grade 1 Braille. Then I'm going to type another one. It's going to say, this one is going to be in grade 2 Braille. Okay, and then I'm going to change the first one to that Agency FB font. So I'm going to select it. I'm going to go up to our Home tab here. Agency FB, there we go. Okay. Okay, and then I need to change the second one to Times New Roman. Okay. Okay. And then I'm just going to go to Addins, Tiger, and translate. And you should see the first line in grade 1 and the second line in grade 2. Okay, now I'm going to go back to the questions. Lori Lee asks, how do you remove paper from the spot dot when it jams? And usually you can pull it out, and if it's really stuck in there, you can actually take off the duplexer from the back. There's two round grooved little buttons. You can push both of them in on either side and then pull that duplexer off. And then usually you can get the paper out better that way. Mary Hall asks how to make sure that the settings are correct for the Avery labels. And that was actually the details button on the labelings, on the mailings labels dialog box that we went to. If you hit details, it'll tell you all the margins you need to set. And then you just set the corresponding margins in your Tiger menu under document settings. I have a question from Carlos about the Tiger profiles, and to my knowledge there's not any limit of how many profiles you can save. Lynette Stevens asks about Braille labels and whether there's any minimum or maximum size, which there doesn't seem to be any standard for it. You can get whatever you can find at the office supply store, and if that's one of the supported ones in Microsoft Word, then you can go ahead and use that template and should be all right. Tamara asks when if we'll have a webinar to do graphics and pie charts, and that is in the future, but we don't have any plans set in concrete for when to do one like that yet. Laura asks if we have to change the paper size from the control panel when we start doing labels. Actually, the control panel with the printers and devices, changing your paper size in the driver is really only something you have to do the first time you set up your printer. After that, you should be able to change your paper size in your document settings in Word and have it work correctly. But if you do get an error about it, then you'll need to make sure that it's set in the driver to match what's set in Word. There's several different templates that are available. You just need to look in Microsoft Word about different label templates that are available. This question is from Rice. I have a question from Pamela Oliver. What does uncontracted mean? That just means that the Braille translation is not going to have any contractions in it. I have a question from Marek again about the translating with the different fonts. And yes, it is possible to actually set those to 2 different languages. And I have another question about that from Kristen. I'll just go back to Microsoft Word, and I'll show you in the Formatter Settings window again. Okay. I'm going to have one of my colleagues clear up the screen a little bit for the sighted users here. Okay, so you just go back to the Formatter Settings in your Tiger menu. And so, say I have something that's half in English, but then I have long passages, say in German or something. I select German, and then I make sure all my German is in the matching font, and I can set all my Braille settings for that language separately. And so then both of the languages will come out with their different contraction settings and all of that whatnot. Okay. I have a question about whether or not Grade 2 is supported in other languages than English, and yes, depending on the language, most of the developed countries have contracted Braille systems set up for their languages. Some of them don't, and some of the developing countries don't sometimes have contracted Braille. So that's a good question. I have a question about whether or not Tiger Software Suite works with Microsoft Office 2010. And we are currently developing support for Office 2010, but it's not really supported yet, and we can't guarantee that it will work if you try it. Kristen asks, does the Tiger do Nemeth? And yes, it does actually support Nemeth that's entered into Word with math type. Mary Hall asks if APH labels are supported. They're not one of the defaults that's included with Microsoft Word, but you can actually create a new form in the mailings and labels if you want to use that. I have a question about math type, and yes, you do have to purchase a math type license if you want to use it as a full licensed version with our translator. And again, you can get math type through Design Science. That's the company that makes that product. I have a question about papers jamming and sticky labels. And it's not really our experience that the labels jam with any great frequency. So we seem to be out of questions. If there's anything else that you want to ask, feel free to enter that into the question pane, and I'll try to answer it to the best of my abilities. Patrick says, can he go to sleep? And I think that would be okay. Okay, thank you all for attending our webinar. I hope that it was informative for everyone. And we're going to go ahead and stay connected until 1 o'clock, and just in case anybody else has any other questions that we can answer. So thank you for coming. We'll be here for the next few minutes. Okay, Lynette Stevens asks if I can demo another label creation, and I'll go ahead and do that really quick here. Okay, so now I'm going to get to Microsoft Word here and create a new document. Okay, so I've got a clean Word document here, and the first thing you need to do is go to Mailings, and then arrow over to Labels. Okay, and then I've got this dialog called Envelopes and Labels, and I need to go down and choose Details. I'm sorry, actually Options first. Select the product number, and it's still on 8662 from before, but you can see there's a long list of product numbers, and before that you can actually select the label vendor. So there's a lot of different vendors and templates that are available. Okay, I think it was Avery US letter before. Okay, I'm going to change it back to our 8662 here. Okay, and then you hit OK, and then you hit New Document, and it gives you the blank template. And then you would go and make sure that your menu or your margins for the Braille document matched up. So I'm going back to Tiger and then Formatter Settings, and Document Settings. And I didn't change anything, so it should still be in that. But if I had changed it to something else, if I was translating a book or something and had changed my Tiger profile, I could just select it up here in the top combo box and set it to Avery Labels. Okay, so then I just go back to my Word document and I can type in the labels. I also realized that I had changed my labels to show Marek about grade 1 and grade 2 Braille, and I need to change those back so that it's going to get translated correctly. So I'm going to go back to my Tiger menu and Formatter Settings, Language Settings, and change it back to English, and change it back to Contracted Braille, and the font needs to be set on any. Okay. And then I just hit OK. Okay, and now I'm going to fill in my labels. Oops. And then I'm going to set them to Braille 29, or well, size 29 actually. All right, so I've got my labels filled in. I've just got the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4 for each label. Okay, so that's another rundown of creating the labels. I have a question about the Braille labels and the availability of special, thicker Braille labels. And APH does actually have some special thicker labels that are better for Braille, but you can use ViewPlus embossers with the normal stuff and it will be fine. You can set your dot height to low in your driver like I showed at the beginning of the webinar. I have a question about whether or not the archive is going to be available, and yes, the recording will be available, and you will receive an email telling you where you can download the movie or video file of this webinar. Alright, so 2 more minutes left, and then we will go ahead and close out. Okay, well, it's 1 o'clock, so we're going to log out and close the meeting, but thank you everyone for attending.